Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of RevvED live stream series. My name is Catalina Margosa, and I am the communication specialist here at RevvED, and I am honored to be hosting today's episode. For those of you that don't know, RevvED is a series where we feature those making a difference in our community by having conversations with them to understand the work that they are doing and why it is important to them. We have awarded 25 different individuals with our Impacto Changemaker Awards, and today we have another awardee joining us. This Impacto Changemaker is a musician, leader, and mentor in our community, and he uses music to inspire others, educate others, and bring them together. Welcome, Enrique Chi. Bienvenidos, Enrique.
Hi, Catalina. Thanks for having me, and to letting us talk about the work that we're doing here in Kansas City.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for joining us today. Let's go ahead and get right into it by just getting to know you a little bit better. So please tell us who you are. What are some of the things that you do? It's likely you wear multiple hats, and especially with your organization, Art as Membership, and your band, Making Movies.
Yeah. So my name's Enrique Chi. I'm a Panamanian immigrant. So I was born in Panama, Santiago, Panama. Tons of Chinese American immigrants. So that's why I have a Chinese last name. So the immigrant experience is part of my family's story in many different ways, not just my own personal story. And when we moved to the United States, we were supposed to only be here for a little while, but we ended up staying. I was 6 years old. And for me, music was a refuge and a connection um, to remember who I am and to remember there's a world much bigger than a suburb of Kansas City where my parents ended up, because there was a great ESL program there. And so that kind of gives a framework for how I, though I'm a rock and roll musician, have become connected to all this community work. It just kind of felt natural. When our band was starting, we always had the dream that, someday we'll get big and then we'll help out our community. I think everybody has that dream. I'll get really successful and then I can start that orphanage or that whatever. For us, like the music school or whatever it would be. And we're touring in Texas. This is before the band could sell out, a small room anywhere. We probably couldn't fill up a phone booth, to be honest, in most places. But we did meet people that were already working in the community in other cities, even though they didn't have any fame or whatever. They weren't rock stars. They were just musicians that had found a way to connect, and that really inspired us. So 10 years ago now, we started a music camp at the Mattie Rhodes Center in the historic Northeast. We just thought that their site, I love the after school arts programs they were doing, and that their location in the Northeast was perfect because here is an immigrant neighborhood. It's a music desert, though I wouldn't have had that language 10 years ago, as in there's not music education outlets around the neighborhood. There's not private guitar instructors in the vicinity. There's not a great music store. And that allowed us to just bring a free 1-week camp to the community. And I think we charged $20 and you got free lunch. So you basically paid your lunch. The whole camp, the whole week was free. And every year we would come back to this camp, and it gained momentum, and people would ask us how to do more. And we started to pivot the camp around songwriting, because we realized that a lot of these young people, they may want to play guitar or piano or drums or sing or be a hip hop artist, but the main thing they first needed to feel was just the confidence that they could do it. And songwriting was a great way to get that sense of identity out, get their stories moving, and a great way for the fact that a couple years in, we would have some kids drive in from the suburbs because their parents are Making Movies fans. They had heard about us on NPR. At that point, the band did have some momentum. And they're sitting there having had 5 years of private music instruction next to a kid who walked up to the camp from their neighborhood home, having always desired to touch an instrument, but never having had the opportunity. And so the songwriting became a way to make the camp function for both of those kids, because they could both collaborate on their creativity. So kind of a long story. Making Movies continues its journey. We tour internationally. We just put out a brand new album in May. We were playing all over the US and Mexico, and I'm home during the weeks, but I'll be on the road every weekend this month, and like about half of September, half of October, most of November. So we're busy. But this program, this energy that was started with the 1 week camp has become a whole organization that does the same thing. It uses music, the act of songwriting, the act of expression as a way to empower young people.
No, that's awesome. That's definitely amazing. And music is certainly a pillar that brings people together. And I'm sure you know that from all the work that you're doing. My father actually was and still is a DJ. So I saw that a lot growing up myself,
That's
and
great.
I've been on the radio. Yeah. So I understand how music is a base for community and how it creates a safe space for everyone. So how old were you when you got started in music, and just kind of can you tell us a little bit about your music journey growing up?
Yes. I started playing guitar about 8 or 9 years old. My dad was played guitar, and so he was my guitar teacher. And then I kind of gave it up for a couple of years, about till about 10 and a half. I just like I don't even know how long it was, but I remember that I got a couple chords down, and then I got frustrated and I set it down, and maybe a year later I picked it back up. But from that point it was game over. I really fell head over heels with it, and I loved the early rock and roll stuff. The Beatles. My dad's a big Beatles fan. I really studied his vinyl records. He had a vinyl record collection because in Panama, rock and roll is a very small. There's like a kind of cult rock and roll community, but it's small compared to the community of music of people who like cumbia, salsa, merengue. Like if you're in a taxi in Panama, they're still blasting salsa as if like it was 1979. You know what I mean? Like and so my dad, in order to really get that music around, he'd have to buy the vinyl. He's not going to get it on the radio. So he's always had a nice collection, and that was my education. I would study those records and learn how to play them. Putting the vinyl on there, and so kind of an old school way of learning music. And then when my dad would come home from work, I'd ask him, "All right, Papa, am I doing this right? Did I?" And then he'd be like, "Well, move your finger. You're doing it a little wrong, but let me fix it." And then I often thought as I grew up, wow, what if my dad didn't play guitar? My parents wouldn't have been able to afford private lessons. I started teaching private lessons when I was like 18, 19, and that's when it hit me. I'm like, what I'm charging these families, my parents would not have been able to afford. Thank God my dad played guitar. I don't know how I would have connected to this stuff. And then the band started in early 20s. We kind of got this idea of making a band called Making Movies, that my brother and I, that could have like this rock and roll heritage and this Latinidad, our identity as Latin Americans present. And I always felt there was an energy between salsa music. I'll say salsa music as a really broad spectrum of all dance related folk, Latin American folk inspired dance genres, because that's what salsa was in New York. In New York, it was a bunch of immigrants got together and they're like, "Oh, do you guys do merengue in Dominican Republic? Cool. You guys do cumbias over in Colombia and Panama? Cool. And son cubano." And then they'd mush it all together and have a record with one song with that genre, one song is a bolero, one song's this. They call it salsa. It's a record with all these other influences. So to say really broadly, salsa music. And what I'm referring to is that Afro rhythmic centric dance music from Latin America. I always felt a connection between that and rock and roll, and I couldn't put a finger on it. There's like a sensuality to it. There's an energy. There's a rough around the edges, street culture kind of quality to it. And we knew we could put them together. There's got to be a way to put them together in a way that hadn't been done. It's usually been kind of superficially. Maybe it's like Santana's been pretty close to the concept where he's like a blues artist with Latin percussion. That's pretty close. Los Lobos have made great strides in that way. They have some songs that use the Caribbean influences, but we knew that there was a different way to combine them. And then we started touring and we started making songs, and we knew we had to get out of Kansas City. I'll be honest about Kansas City's music scene. Kansas City's music scene is uh, is supportive and caring and tiny and not very developed. There's not infrastructure here. There's no industry. There's no ways to educate yourself on how to create artistic excellence. So we kind of intuitively knew that. We bought an old van and we would put ourselves on tour around the country, and that became our education. And then we'd have these like enlightening moments where we'd end up in a city like New Orleans, and the presenter is talking about at Preservation Hall about the early jazz and blues scene and how Jelly Roll Morton described it, a classic, you know, recorded by Alan Lomax in his documentation of American music. And this dude tells a story, and he's basically tells a story that when he wrote this jazz song, blues slash jazz song, he got this riff from his Spanish friends, which he means the Cuban guys he was hanging out with, because those musicians would trade gigs with Havana, Cuba. There was a ferry. So he started playing the riff on his left hand. Boom, 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 boom. And it's like, that's La Paloma. Boom, boom, in Cuba. Boom, 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 boom. He goes, I just stole that and I made the melodies blue. And then he goes and plays a very early New Orleans sounding jazz thing on top of it. And he goes, all I did was change the color from red to blue. And that's the Jelly Morton story. And you can Jelly Roll Morton story. You can actually find that on Spotify because it's a documented conversation. And then I had this aha moment because Cuban music is such a part of all of Latin American music. They had radios that impacted the Caribbean. And my grandfather lived in Cuba for a decade, and he brought back that music. And what happens in 18th and Vine and my story never had connected. In my mind, they're two beautiful stories. 18th and Vine thing's beautiful. My music story is another planet. And then I went, huh, no, it isn't. The blues came up from New Orleans to Kansas City, and the blues is influenced by Cuban music. It's one story that went like this and went,
Mm-hmm.
So then making movies lives in that space. We live in that space where we play from the united heritage, the shared DNA that rock and roll has, which is the jazz blues thing, and son cubano, salsa, cumbia, merengue have, because there's a point where they link.
Mm-hmm.
And that point is in the African diaspora. It's also in the mix of indigenous sounds because those communities were sharing ideas. It's those scales and flute melodies and things. Without getting super heady about it, we play rock and roll from there. And that is what makes me feel super proud to make music, because I know that we're doing something that is unique to us globally. There's not another making movies on the planet. So if you like what we do, you have to come to us.
Definitely. No, that's so interesting. And it really shows how music is all connected in all aspects. And I think you guys definitely imply that within your guys' music as well. And of course, just within the work you do in general. Um, and yeah, it's just so inspiring to know that we have leaders like you and your fellow members of making movies in the community providing this work and are out there doing it every day. But sometimes this work can be difficult. And I'm sure there are some issues and challenges you have experienced. As you mentioned, the music scene in Kansas City isn't very much grounded. And I'm sure you've experienced that through your music career so far as well. So, what are some of the notable issues you and needs that you see in the communities that you serve and perform in?
Well, I think that speaking to Kansas City youth, because I guess we could separate my mind into two places. So from a making movies place, from a rock and roll place in Kansas City, one thing that we noticed early on is that there wasn't like I was going to start talking about youth, but I've been on the making movies train of thought, so I'll do that for a second. Then I'll talk about the youth programs. We started making our own mini festival like 5-6 years ago, because often festivals and promoters around here would not invite us. And there was one promoter in Oklahoma. We had been on a tour with a really established Americana artist, hooray for the Riff Raff. But she's got Latino heritage, and so she likes our band a lot. She took us on tour, which normally the general protocol is headlining artist brings artists on tour. Venue doesn't really have a say in it, right? If they book the package, they booked the package, and that's a package of 2 artists.
Mhm.
And we were on tour, and this promoter in his Americana venue in Oklahoma was fighting tooth and nail to not let us perform, because he said, we don't do that kind of music here. That's because we sing in Spanish, right? Because it's certainly not having guitars, drums, and bass. They certainly do that kind of music there, which is what we do. And it's a Spanish thing, right? And that was just a somewhere on the line on the spectrum between ignorance and racism. And then we performed, and I caught wind of this because the promoter came up and apologized to me and said, hey, I'm sorry, I was trying to fight to not let you play. I didn't think it would work with our audience, but they loved it. You all did great. And so that attitude is not unique to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's not unique to Kansas City, though we've experienced it multiple times. It permeates the Midwest, where there's an ignorance to Latino culture and a resistance of things different than what is known. And I think we've all seen that wave of white supremacy that kind of crested over in the last couple of years, and those concepts impact the music industry as much as they impact anything else. So we often had to create our own spaces and curate our own spaces, and that's why we created a festival that's launching this year, September 10th at Grinders. Celebrate Americana. We misspell the word to say, hey, Americana. If that's supposed to represent music from the United States, well, you have to include immigrant music, indigenous music, Black music, and Latino music in stride with the other stuff. And that's why we've curated Los Lobos members, Mireya from Flora Toloache, Grammy-winning artist, Asdru from Ozomatli, those folks who not only have helped us mentor kids in the past, but they also doing their own work in their communities. And then we have D Smoke, who's an incredible hip hop artist who just won the Rhythm and Flow TV show of Netflix. He's been on tour with Alicia Keys, and he's also community minded. And in the contract, he has to inspire our kids. And so we have to have a meet and greet in a moment where the kids can meet a rising hip hop star who has a community focus, as well as other incredible acts. And then right now, there's early bird tickets are still on sale till Saturday, so it's still $25 to buy a ticket to this. And this festival supports our free music programs. So all the sponsorship, all the merch sales, all the ticket sales are a part of the ecosystem that makes it possible for us to continue to have year-round music programs for free. And when I go snap into those music programs, what kids need here in Kansas City, I started with this idea. We call it art as mentorship because music funding can be hard to land. As funny as it sounds, Kansas City boasts a big music appreciation because of the Charlie Parker history. But I knew that if I called it the music program or whatever, that I was going to have an uphill battle to find funding. So I called it art as mentorship. I could walk into the room and I would sell it on the missing entrepreneurial pieces in the Kansas City music infrastructure. That most artists in Kansas City are maybe very talented, but have limited knowledge on the entrepreneurial skills that they may need to start a career. And that was the initial pitch that would allow us to get some funding to expand from a 1-week camp into a 12-week camp, and then a year later into 2 12-week camps. And then now we have a recording studio, programming space here in the historic Northeast, right up the street from y'all at Concourse Park is where the programming space is. And we grew into that place. But we wrote this curriculum because there was another part of it that was we saw happening at the Matty Rhodes camps that we had to reverse engineer. These kids kept saying, well, more so parents actually would say, that week transformed my kid's life. And we would take it as a real sweet compliment, but are often confused how to, like, 4 numbnuts who are just trying to do a nice thing in the community, who don't know how to, we're not really professional educators or camp supervisors or like not-for-profit organizers, none of that. We're a band. We want to do something cool and nice for the community because we believe in it. How could that create that change? And what we uncovered is that by leaning into songwriting, we were tapping into a really powerful mental health skill, which is the ability to feel comfortable being vulnerable and feel like you have a small community around you that supports that. Because the kids were using the song as a vehicle to talk about what they're going through. Well, I've been going through a lot of anxiety, or I've dealt with some depression. And because it's songs and because everyone's on the same place, everybody's having to write their song, then everybody applauds each other for it. Literally, when they're in process of making their song, here's my song about anxiety. I only have one verse done and a chorus. Let me show you. Bum, bum, bum. They show, okay, the song ends. What happens in the room? Their peers and professional musicians applaud them. You feel it. You feel the vulnerability that these young people are putting out there. And then that unlocks something for a young person of realizing, wait, it's okay for me to talk about this stuff. It's not wrong to talk about this stuff. And there's a whole room full of people that also go through some version of it. And okay, I'm not an alien. We all go through something like this. So we worked with a brilliant art therapist, Sherry Jacobs, to create a curriculum that unpacked that. It's like whatever was happening in that space, we need to make sure we replicate it and do it right every time we run the program. And so when I fast forward to today, started from an entrepreneurial place, teach kids how they could make art and then maybe make a career from it. Now my focus, it was that plus the mental health piece. We always talked about those three elements: the music, the entrepreneurial, and the mental health. Now I would put mental health at the top by like 10, by like this much, like because nothing else matters if a young person doesn't feel confident to express themselves, confident to make a plan, confident to put their artistic work out there, none of the other stuff's going to work. As a matter of fact, better even stop trying to make a song. We need to make sure that this first thing is in place, and we are creating a gateway to those conversations. It's like, maybe you're not comfortable talking about mental health, but you want to make music and you want to be a star and you want to be on the stage. And that's the cool part, is this, because of our connections in the city, our kids are performing at Crossroads Music Fest, Plaza Art Fair, at our festival. They're on stages, right? So people want that. Yeah, I want to be seen. I want to have my nice little video on your Instagram page, like you did for the other kids that did the program last time. I want to be seen. Okay, you want to be seen? Cool. Come here. But now we're going to open up a space to talk about what we're all going through. And though we're not mental health professionals, we're creating that opportunity. And now I think the challenge moving forward as an organization is, for me, when it was small, it was easy. I have one or two mental health professionals that I can call on when we realize there's a bigger issue at hand. But now I need to create a systematized pipeline so that we can be that kind of front line where we make it cool, we make it fun, exciting to be in the program. You want to be here, and then it opens up that doorway to say, if you're going through something like anxiety, depression, etc., please speak up about it. My last bit about this, I'm passionate about it, as you can tell, because I just rambled for like 3 minutes straight. But in the Rebel Song Academy that happened in the last program that we ran, the 12-week one, was the winter spring one, and we've been doing 1-week camps and stuff this summer, and then we'll start the 12-week programs up here in a few weeks. But the one we just finished, it seemed that every young person in the class had gone through or been connected to teenage suicide. The level of impact that has on the teenage community right now is so big. Like, they all knew someone in their grade who had attempted or had committed. They all had a friend who, a lot of the songs, like there's at least 2 or 3 songs that dealt with a friend who attempted it, a friend who committed. One young person told me, yeah, I've had 3 in the last 2 years. And it's like, that wasn't the way it was when I was a teenager. So I feel that if I were to identify one thing, it would be mental health for young people.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that, because mental health is huge, and music definitely helps with that. Some people, just think music is just a little fun, little like hobby at times, but really it is helpful when it comes to those types of issues, mentally, especially. I know music helps me, helps motivate me, pushes me, and it's definitely what has inspired all of your work as well. And that's, yeah, amazing. And so I wanted to know, what kind of music do you guys use at your program? Is there a specific kind of genre or type of style, or is it just kind of like a little bit of everything?
Well, that's a special part, is that each individual student gets to choose whatever style they want to make, and they just learn the mechanisms of writing a song. What's cool about writing songs is that, like most artistic output, like most storytelling, there's a certain arc that most songs adhere to, genre or not. 100-year-old song, 1-year-old song, because just like when you tell a story, you kind of have to set it up and then introduce the characters, then you have to have a conflict, and then you have to resolve it. Like, pretty hard to tell a story without doing some version of that. Pretty hard to write a song without doing some traditional things. And so that allows us to let the kids just choose whatever genre they want to make. So we definitely some folky singer-songwriter stuff, some more upbeat stuff, heavy rock and roll was happening, hip hop. Kabwe, who was an immigrant from Tanzania, and he had a really cool hip hop tune that he made during his 12-week program. And you can follow that at Artist Mentor. Like, if you go to Instagram, at Art as Mentorship, that's our IG account. You can, if you start scrolling through, you'll hear the tunes that the kids recorded, because part of their prize for being in the program, for working hard, is that they get free studio time at a small but mighty recording studio that we built. we treated it with the respect. Like, we made sure that, like, that making movies would be down to record in here. It had to be at that caliber, even though it's small or whatever, and maybe doesn't have every microphone in the on the planet. It just has high quality ones that we would, as professionals, want to use. We want to make sure the kids have access to that. And during the pandemic, we were able to raise the money and build that in the back of Interurban Art House's art building. They gave us an amazing contract to go in there, and the studio's up and running. We recorded 25 teenager songs in the last couple months.
Wow, that's awesome. Great, yeah. And at RevvED here, we also advocate for representation and change, similar to what you just said that you're providing, and that equity as well. But we are trying to bring that into the education of Latinx students, and we're always very curious. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your educational experience, what that was like growing up, but more specifically, your music education experience?
Well, so I may not be the perfect candidate for you all, because I stopped. I had a full ride to college. I scored highly on my ACTs and had great grades in high school. But I realized quickly that the stuff I wanted to do, I wasn't going to be able to pull it out of a university. I needed to just dive in to make it happen. And I may have been, in hindsight, I would have stuck around, and, like,
Mhm.
if I would have known, predicted the future, I never pictured being an executive director. I would have taken some not-for-profit, budgeting classes and grant writing classes or something. But back then, I didn't see that. So that was my teenage self being like, I'm in a band. We got offered a record deal, and I don't know anything about what else I'm supposed to do. I just have to dive in and learn by way of making music. Um, and I think that pre my high school education, I will say that my elementary ESL teacher was a non-Spanish speaker. She actually was not bilingual. She only spoke one language, but she had the gift of teaching, which I do believe is a gift that some folks have. They're, like, kind of destined to do it. And she was able to teach me how to speak English, but more importantly, make me feel safe being an immigrant who didn't understand the language. And she had a profound impact on my view of America. I think that she made her, like, that one safe bubble in my life, made me not realize that I was actually a little unsafe in other spaces in my life, which is a great lesson for all this work that we do. In that, like, maybe a young person doesn't have a lot of safe spaces, but if there's that one stable, safe place, it can be such an impact. So Miss Maggedy, I will, till the day I pass, I will praise her for her amazing generosity and skill as a teacher, just in Lee Summit, Missouri. That's why my parents put us in school there, because they heard about her somehow. Somebody told them, there's a lady, Miss Maggedy, but you have to be in this district, so you go find an apartment there, and that's how I ended up going to school there. So she had a huge impact. But the other piece that I would say about my music education is that when I was in Kansas City and making demos and things that would become early, making movies, recordings, and whatnot, there wasn't a lot of. I didn't really m- learn the things that I have had to learn to make records now, to make albums. There was, like, a different attitude or perspective in the studio that I didn't see until I left town. And it was when Steve Berlin of Los Lobos wanted to make a record with us that I really got to see it. And I remember being, like, blown away by the attention to detail, and more so, like, what he was focused on. Like, his prioritization was so different than I'd ever experienced. And so I think that the music path is an ancient craft, and it's been around for thousands of years, and it's been mostly taught as an oral tradition, or taught through the act of mentorship, by sitting next to a master and gleaning from them. And that's always been my education. I sat next to my father, who played much better than me for most of my life, until I passed him as a young adult, because I devoted my life to music. And just by sitting next to him and watching him play, that was my education. And then I sat next to Steve Berlin, a masterful record maker and musician, and same thing, just studying it. Wow, what are you doing there? You're making a spreadsheet for all the things we need to do for each song, and you're color coding it because that's how you remember. Okay, interesting. Wow. You're not listening to the detail of the song, you're listening to the spirit of the song. Huh. What do you describe as the spirit of the song? And, like, that's how I learned. So that's with our music education program. We have curriculum, and we have a system, and the kids go through 12 weeks and they get a journal that's written by a mental health professional. That's all in place.
Mhm.
But it's also to facilitate just the opportunity to have a professional musician sit there and sit next to a young person who has that dream and create that connectivity that I had because of the blessing of my dad being a musician, and because of the blessing of Los Lobos liking us. And when we open up a show, Steve saying, "Can I make a record with you?" And then many years of those type of experiences. That's been my education. So I think traditional education is due for a revolution, and a reminder that a lot of things are best learned that way.
No, that's awesome. You definitely had some people that were there to help you and support you in every way possible. And now you're bringing that support and representation in music with the program that you're doing as well, and with your band. It looks like we have a comment, so let me bring that up real quick from Show Me Schools.
Oh yeah, that is cool. It's true. A teacher can make all the difference in the world. And I stayed close with Miss Maggedy till she passed. She was an amazing woman.
Yes, I love that. Well, with all that you have learned in your education and your experiences, we see that you are now applying that to your own work and giving back to your community in that way. So, what would you say to those who want to get engaged and become a strong voice in our community, but maybe even those who just want to be musicians or use music as a resource?
I would say just be fearless. Go dive in. We had no idea what we were doing, and arguably still don't. We're figured out every day. So just dive in with all of your heart and your passion, and don't be afraid to learn and ask questions from people who are farther along the journey than you. And for folks who want to connect with the stuff that's already happening, you can learn more at artasmentorship.org about the organization. And with the band, it's makingmovies.world. But there's a really simple way to kind of get a taste for this. Come to our festival, September 10th, Celebrate Americana. For 25 bucks, you get to see legendary musicians, Steve Berlin and David Hidalgo of Los Lobos, rising hip hop star D Smoke, and a bunch of incredible acts and kids performing. And know that every ticket purchase helps support this community work. And then you'll see the actual, like, the whole team will be there. You'll see the kids, you'll see the volunteers, and that's a great way to kind of introduce yourself to what we got going on, because we have an exciting couple years ahead. The Rebel Sound Academy is replicating. We're bringing it into a few schools now for the first time, alongside doing it ourselves. And I think it's going to be, it's going to grow exponentially over the course of the next year or two. So that's just exciting, and I never dreamed of that part. We just wanted to have one really cool week for kids that we could feel proud of giving back to our community, and it has birthed this whole other life, which is kind of incredible.
Yep, you definitely continue it, and that's amazing to see. And I actually put the Art as Mentorship website and Instagram in the comments, so if people want to learn more and follow Art as Mentorship and get involved, that there's the information right there. That But we appreciate everything that you do for the community and for using music as a resource. But we're just going to go ahead and start wrapping some things up. Thank you, Enrique, for joining us, and definitely keep shining a light in this community and bringing that music as a resource, and as support for those youth, especially in our community. You are very talented and inspiring in so many ways, and we love being able to shine a light on that. So thank you for taking the time to join me today and for participating in our RevvED Up live stream series. Keep up the amazing work you do and continue to use your talents in music to make this world a better place.
Thank you, Catalina. And we're neighbors. We're literally right up the street from you all. So I'll shoot you a note, and I'll come by in person this week and say hello.
Yeah, and definitely send us any information you have to with those festivals that you have coming up and any other programs you have coming up. We'd love to share them and get people, informed about it.
I love it. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you. Yes. All
Bye-bye.
right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.